and good afternoon. Welcome to this panel. It's a pleasure being here talking to you about Portugal and what the country is doing for startups and scale-ups, and what a journey these last 10 years. Portugal currently, in terms of proportion, is one of the European countries where startups and scale-ups more represent in the economy. We have been attracting investment from external and international investors at a record level. Currently, in terms of proportion, we have more unicorns per PIB and per population, 3 times what Spain, France, Germany, and UK have. So this area, entrepreneurship, startups, and scale-ups are now a big part of our economic and general activity in the country. So they are a big priority. And I'm happy to have here with us representatives of the responsibles for these results and for these achievements. And first, the entrepreneurs and the businessmen, the ones that primarily make this happen. So we have here Marcelo Levre, COO and co-founder of Remote, one of the Portuguese founded unicorns, Remote. And it's a pleasure being here with you, Marcelo. Thank you for coming. And we have also here the other co-responsible for these interesting and very positive results of Portugal in the last years. We have the Secretary of State for Digitalization and Administrative Modernization, Mário Campo Largo. Mário, thank you very much for coming and joining us in this panel. I would start with Marcel for a first question. Marcel, tell us all about Remote and what has been this journey in the last few years since Remote was founded by you.
Yeah, thank you. So Remote is a global employment company. Companies all across the world, in whatever country you want to hire people remotely or in other countries, whatever works. And we do that. We help them process, manage, and pay people across the world. We started January 2019, so roughly 4 years ago. And today we're over 1,000 people, literally all across the globe. And we operate in over 80 countries at the moment. We help and manage and pay people literally everywhere in the world. So it's been a huge adventure as well, challenging, but also very, very passionate for sure. We started with 2 people from Portugal, working on this very tough, crazy idea that no one has ever thought of or worked on. And that's why we decided it was even more exciting and why it was more worth the challenge.
And meanwhile, you had COVID, so...
Yeah, every year there's something crazy happening. There's a pandemic, a war, banks falling left and right. And so, every year you sort of have to brace yourself for impact. Something's going to happen. I swear we have nothing to do with it. But because we're a global business, we have to handle all the outcomes of it. But it's been great, and it's been a fundamental privilege to be able to build such a diverse global business, especially outside of a country that is usually not thought of as the first destination for unicorns or new technology or startups, which was the perfect grounds for us to even feel more motivated and challenged to break the mold.
Great. Well, Mário, the existence of a Secretary of State of Digitalization in Portugal, specifically dedicated to that, reporting directly to the Prime Minister, reflects the importance of this area in the country. How important and how significant is digitalization for the development of a country like Portugal?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I mean, it's particularly good to be here, to be with Marcel. We are one of our unicorns. And despite the name Remote, it's good not to have him remotely speaking here, but being here with us, because he can provide a first impression of all what he lived throughout those different crises. The government had nothing to do with that as well, just to clarify. Portugal is a digital nation. I mean, it's not by accident that we are belonging to a group that is actually called Digital Nations. The 10 most advanced countries in the world in the provision of services from the public administration, digital services. And that's one of the reasons why the government and the Prime Minister himself wanted to have attached to him the area of digitalization and public modernization. The two things go one with the other. Some of the things that sometimes Portugal and some of the southern countries are perceived to be is having costs of context for people to come to install. What we want to pass here as a very important message is Lisbon and Portugal is the place to be right now. You are an entrepreneur, you want the best environment to develop your ideas, come to Lisbon, come to Portugal. Portugal offers you a good economic environment, a good fiscal situation, as a startup law that just passed recently that is extremely favorable. As the ecosystem is particularly important because the more people around, the more cross-fertilization. So, guys, come to Portugal. We have a political objective of transforming Portugal every day in a more digital nation and to create the environment that will allow startups to thrive. And this is particularly important as an objective and is supported, as we can see, not just by a big number of startups, but from the startups that have been scaled up and today belong not to Portugal, belong to the world because actually they serve the world.
No doubt about that. Totally agree. Marcelo, from the perspective of being a leader of a company that grew exponentially in the last 4 years, you have certainly a lot of challenges in what relates to management people, management of culture, organizational culture. How do you do that in an 100% remote company and pass through this exponential growth?
That's a great question. It also depends, it's fundamentally focused on the relationship between the employer and the employee. I think one of the things that most companies take for granted is just because people come into the office and through the door, that they have some sort of allegiance or mandate to perform, and that's fundamentally not the case. The best thing it's an investment. It's an investment from the company within the employee and from the employee into the company because the career is worth so much these days. And from that perspective, you need to be able to be clear and transparent, because it's not the same thing. What are the expectations from both sides? Rather than having a business that is run on, that mumbo jumbo of we're a family or this or that. No, I mean, there's a clear expectation from both sides. Mm-hmm. People want to get paid, have a comfortable life and comfortable job, and businesses have their goals to be met. So as long as those are clearly defined, then with freedom, with responsibility, with autonomy, comes the best of both worlds. You have a relaxed environment, you can manage yourself, your own life, and your work in parallel. And it is much fruitful because you go from living to work to live. It's very, very different approach for sure. And so you don't, and you can be your best self, right? You don't need to go into the office and put on the mask every day before you leave the house and then take it out when you come home to this weird severance-like situation. And so that is the most fundamental. And cultures are very different. You go from one country to another. People's expectations, beliefs, understandings of things, communication. You don't make jokes in the same way. And it's about fundamentally inclusiveness and respect, but also assuming positive intent, because people are different all across the globe. And if those two are accepted as part of the get-go, it's better for everyone.
Yeah. And don't you feel that we have currently, with the new generations and the new necessities and challenges of these youngest people, you have to break some old barriers of labor relation, of taking into attention what are the perspectives, the ambitions, the personal expectations of each one individual. How do you cope with that? I mean, in an organization with more than 1,000 people around the world, how do you get attention to each one's perspective and each one's desires, let's say? You have to break through the old labor organization rules and mechanisms?
Sometimes we because we're bound to local labor laws and regulations, what we can do in many cases is actually work with government and you know, bring our the remote is just the first step into the future of work, where people can work, you know, dedicate themselves to the things they're passionate about, not necessarily just worry first about the things that can put food on the table.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference in mentality. And with all these changes in labor across the world, with all these incentives from all these countries, and of course, the balance of power from employee to employer and regulators are changing too, because they need to adapt more to each other on a faster pace. And of course, there's a lot to be done within that space, but absolutely, you know, there's always two things that you can do, avoid apart from breaking the law, which is one is work with what you have, and second, work with the governments to make sure that they do understand what is the path forward, and of course the people will push in that direction too. But the opportunity is for both sides. It's for people to have a better, you know, quality of life, I'm including work in that, but also for countries to be able to reap the benefits of this ever-increasing diversity, people flowing in and out and enriching the country, moving in from different cultures, helping to grow the economy, local economies. So we truly live in this global world where people flow more easily. So that begets, of course, more flexibility, more adaptability, and understanding of the new needs of the new labor, market labor.
Yeah, no doubt, absolutely. Mario, well, I think you agree with me that the main responsibles for this performance of Portugal in terms of entrepreneurship are the entrepreneurs, the main responsibles. But I think the public part also is important for this. So I'm talking about a kind of a joint effort between the ones that are in the field, working, launching companies, making their ventures, but also the right public policies directed to this area that support and that make this growth as a country to happen. Can you give us some examples of public policies dedicated to this area that you have in your action plan?
Yeah, Antonio,
towards
but
this?
if you allow me just a bit of reflection on what Marcelo says, this adaptation between society and technology is actually mutually influencing. I mean, you learn as a society with new, technologies, AI, very disruptive. What is the future of work with AI? Does it replace people? Does it multiply the intelligence? Will be this binomial between machine and person important? The laws, the understanding. I think it's important. In Europe, we have this, and in Portugal, we have this perception that is very clear. Yeah. First, our values, our ethical values, the values of our society, the values that guide our continent. Those are very important. And the rest is adapting continuously. And so the public policies reflect exactly that. You know, we started with the transition for digital transition plan that already foresaw a number of initiatives like supporting startups, like creating a Startup Portugal that you lead these days, getting a really important ticket at European level with European Startup Nations Alliance that is actually based in Portugal, but intends to bring a startup environment that is more standardized at European level, that is able to attract talent to Europe and therefore to Portugal, to Madrid, looking into how we do the things in an European way. But above all, to use later on the resilience package to reinforce those policies. And so when today we have very high incentives for almost all the startups that you may have in Portugal, all the accelerators, when we create mechanisms like test beds, it's very important. You know, test beds are sometimes hard to have because small startups, spin-offs of universities don't have the opportunity to test the things in practice, either physically or virtually. That's what the program of test beds will allow you to do, or the digital innovation hubs that will allow you to experiment with cybersecurity or with artificial intelligence, or even when you look to sandbox approaches that in Portugal are called like technological free zones, where you can actually operate side by side with regulators to test new things. All of those are investments that we do. But obviously, what is behind everything is the investment in people. That's why we are looking to programs of literacy, advanced literacy, like the upskill and reskilling. This is particularly important. We don't want to have, I know that you are an engineer, I'm an engineer, we are both electrical engineers or electronic engineers, we are all in the digital. No, the new systems, the new enterprise will not come from us, will come precisely from the mix of different people that, yes, understands the IT perspective. And so upskilling and reskilling is important. But even going back to the school, and programs that will allow you to understand the computational thinking are now being developed in Portugal. So we have a very good generation of technical people. We'll have a better generation in the future.
Oh, great. Well, about ESNA, European Startup Nations Alliance. Tell us a little bit about that. What is the role of ESNA towards an entrepreneurial Europe?
I tend to think like it is a kind of it's not an European agency or whatever, but it's kind of precursor of that. So it's bringing everybody together to reflect about how Europe can be a land for innovation, a land for startups. And if we can align these various things, including the investment, this is particularly important. It's very interesting to see moves of OpenAI, for example, trying possibly to come to Europe, recognizing therefore Europe for intelligence, for artificial intelligence, offers a number of elements that are distinguished around the world. That's what ESNA has to play. And we in Portugal, we believe that this is crucial for us. Look at this. This is called South Summit. The South is not the center in Europe. Portugal is a peripheral country in geographical terms. But do you know what we want to be? We want a new centrality in digital terms. That's why we are investing so much in submarine cables, in opportunities to bring digital and green together to have the most advanced, the most economic, the most energy-friendly, the most sustainable data centers in Portugal, because we want to complement the attraction of talent with opportunities to develop in practice new systems based on high-performance computing, in high-speed networks, and having the world as at the distance of a submarine cable, I mean at the distance of a few milliseconds.
No doubt, and the infrastructure is a really important point that is valued by everyone that wants to move business or start a business in a country, no doubt about that. Marcelo, in your perspective, how do you see the Portuguese startup ecosystem, and how is remote contributing or giving back to that ecosystem?
You know, compared to, let's say the US, it's very nascent, but given the stats that we're taking out of it, of course, the number of unicorns is a good metric. Of course, it's not a trailing metric saying, hey, this is the best, but it's a really fundamental, great indicator of what has happened in the past, let's say, 10 years. Like the evolution, the creation of new companies, of new businesses that are, and this is very important, that great companies, great startups do not necessarily need to be unicorn. But these companies, they create a very thick and important fabric of industrial business that sustains a country, that creates more jobs, that fosters innovation and brings as well diversity into a country, because we know that the ecosystem is always, these sort of startup ecosystems are more welcoming towards others. And so this improves literally everyone's lives around it. And I could see from the moment at sort of early stages where, all of a sudden you now have, startups working next to each other, or, creating this sort of environment where you can go into a coffee place and meet someone working that is creating their own new idea. And all of a sudden a conversation is sparked, and you're also building something that you can have synergies with. And of course, these later stage companies such as Remote, I think, we all live in society. There's always this sort of business versus community, but one cannot live without the other. And so the only way to push forward both sides, both bigger businesses, smaller businesses, and the rest of the community, is if we all work together. And so there's, us that are sort of trailblazers in that sense. We have a lot to, share. not necessarily to teach, because it worked for us, may not work for others, but fundamentally show this is what worked, and this is where we can help. And this tight connection, rather than building businesses back to back and not having a synergy going on, because that helps no one. And this all of a sudden creates this emergent, almost living ecosystem of businesses that help each other. They collaborate not just financially, but from technical as well. And in the past 10 years, it's been insane. Remote is across the world, but right now, everywhere I seem to meet, they say, well, I'm starting a business in Portugal, or I moved in and I'm hiring a company out of Portugal. Out of the the proximity of bridging both continents, right across the pond, but also the fact that everyone speaks English, and food is nice, and that kind of stuff. But it all helps, and it is all part of the primordial mix for success.
Wow, great. Mario, last question, 20 seconds to finish our time. But, well, it's great to see politicians dealing directly with entrepreneurs, coming here with startups. Sometimes startups think a little bit wrong about politicians. They think, well, those were the days when the politicians did their policies inside a cabinet. How do you value to be close to the field, to be close to the entrepreneurship? How do you apply that in your day-to-day work?
Just walk the talk. Just come and talk to people. Know what is the challenges. Try to solve them. I'm here as a servant of the public interest. I mean, the public interest in this domain is by this amazing fabric of entrepreneurs that is developing in Portugal and elsewhere. So I have to listen to them. I have to be with them. I have to try to favor the establishment of more companies in Portugal, big and small. Big because they will profit from the ecosystem, small because they will profit again the ecosystem. The bigger the ecosystem, the more new ideas will come across the different scientific fields or technological fields. That's where the innovation is coming. And your example is a particularly good example. You start small, go fast. This is the ideal world for a startup. Lisbon, Portugal is the ideal world for you to invest next. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to you all. That was it. I hope you liked it. And welcome to South Summit and to Portugal. Thank you.
Thank you.